What's out there? What creates the shadows in the corners or the creatures of the dark? Who are those on the other side? What do they have to say? This is the Gateway Podcast. This is not your normal style of paranormal talk radio. Brought to you live from United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans.
Welcome to this episode of The Gateway. I'm your host, C.L. Thomas. We are broadcast live from United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans. How is everyone out there? I've been doing good. The Las Vegas weather is doing good too. It's been probably, I always feel like I have to tell you guys how Vegas is. It's about 60s to 70s during the day, and it's getting down into the 30s at night. So it's pretty even. There's no wind. There's no anything. It's just really pleasant. It's a good time to be here if you want to come to Vegas. So one of the things, because it is so nice, I've been hiking a lot. And last week I got to meet up with some friends to investigate a ghost town. And I just want to tell you what happened. So during the day, this ghost town has maybe roughly around 50 structures to it, building foundations. And it's pretty during the day, but as soon as that sun goes down, boy, it gets eerie. And my friend, we were telling a couple other witches and things about the feelings that you get as soon as the sun goes down. And they said that they think that shapeshifters happen and that they're coming out of the mountains. As soon as the sun comes down, something unleashes them and they're just all over the place, kind of like elementals or something. I don't know. My guest tonight is actually, I don't want to say he is an expert because nobody in the paranormal is an expert, but he knows what he's talking about. He's done a lot of research. He has a book out called Shapeshifters, A History. His name is John Kachuba. And let me get on here. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sil. Thanks. Nice to be here.
I'm always horrible at openings for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, you're fine.
So how did you get into the research, first of all?
Well, I started off, I started off as a writer that wasn't really necessarily doing any paranormal kind of work. But I grew up in New England, and I lived in Connecticut most of my life until maybe 25, 26 years old. And during the time that I was living there, I lived in the same town part of the time that Ed and Lorraine Warren lived in. And I think your audience might recognize those names. I call them America's godfather and godmother of ghost hunting. But, they were the group that investigated the Amityville horror first and did so much other work in the paranormal field. And so I was always interested basically in history and folklore, and that includes ghost stories. And I was investigating in Connecticut, a place called Dudleytown, which is up in a hill. I don't want to say mountain. Connecticut doesn't really have mountains as such, but a tall hill. And it's basically an abandoned 18th century village. There's nothing there but cellar holes and old wells and things like that. But I was there just for the history of it. And I was taking pictures. And as I was taking pictures of some of these, what was left of these homes and houses and all, I noticed that I was seeing in at least one cellar hole what looked like faces on the film. I'm thinking, it was quite weird. I wasn't expecting that. And I'm thinking, well, it's probably just leaves and all that are forming something that looks like a face. So I enlarged these things. And the more I enlarged them, the more they became truly like a face. So out of the blue, I called the Warrens up and just said, hey, I was up in Dudleytown and I took some pictures and I wonder if you'd have a chance to look at them. And they were so gracious. They said, okay, yeah, come to our house. I had never met these people, They just invited me to their house and they looked at my photos and they were saying, oh, yeah, these are definitely, you have anomalies here. These are definitely, paranormal anomalies. And then they took out their own photo album. They had been to Dudleytown several times, and they had hundreds of photos of mists and orbs and streaks and all kinds of anomalies. So the long story short is they really piqued my interest in doing paranormal stuff, paranormal investigations and all. So I started then a while back, but I didn't start writing about it until I guess my first book was 2004, which was Ghost Hunting Ohio, about ghosts of Ohio, where I live now. But I really say that the Warrens are the ones that spurred me into doing this, that and my love of history and folklore. So
got it. So that's really fascinating that you got to work with the Warrens.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I got to know them, after a while.
What were they like?
They were fantastic people. I have a book out called Ghost Hunters, and it's got a very long subtitle. And I interview a lot of people who are sort of paranormal, I'll call them celebrities or experts in the field. And so I have a chapter about the Warrens. And I talk about the first visit that I had to their house. And at that point, Ed and Lorraine were both probably in their maybe late 50s, early 60s, and they were healthy and everything else. But walking into their house was amazing. I got to their house, and there was nobody there. They said, come at 1 o'clock or whatever time it was. So I got there. There was nobody there. So I parked my car, and I walked into the door, and the front door, it was a screen door. The screen door was closed, but the front door behind it was just wide open. So I'm ringing the doorbell, nobody there. So I went around the back of the house, and there was a big German Shepherd that came out of nowhere. Luckily, there was a fence, and he was barking his head off like a sentry, But as I came back out the front, the Warrens' car pulls up. So they weren't home, but the house was totally open. I could have just walked in. And I said,
that German Shepherd.
Well, he was around back, though. But I said to Lorraine, I said, aren't you, your house is just totally unlocked. Aren't you worried somebody's going to walk in? And she says, she was so sweet. She was like an old school mom. She said, oh, no, dear. She said, nobody's going to enter our house. And she's right. So I go into the house, and the Warrens were very, very strict Roman Catholics. They were practicing Roman Catholics. Their whole approach to the paranormal was very much God versus the devil kind of thing.
Yeah. A lot of the paranormal was actually based on that.
And they were really like that. And their house, when I walked in, CL, the place was like walking into the Vatican. I mean, there were all kinds of holy pictures and crucifixes and, palms from Palm Sunday, all on the walls. Every horizontal surface had little statues of Jesus and Mary and the saints and little fonts of holy water. I mean, I grew up in a very fundamental Catholic family as well. And it was like being in church. It was like unbelievable. But they were so warm and they were so generous. Ed had this persona. He was kind of a bulky guy, big guy. And you kind of thought he was like a tough guy. He kind of sounded like that and came across like that, but he was really a very, very nice guy. And Lorraine, like I said, was just prim, proper, sweet, like a typical, like an old school marm or somebody's grandmother. So that was the first time. The second time I interviewed them, I was at their home again, and this was many years later, and Ed had just suffered a massive stroke. So when I went in their house this time, Lorraine was still her, effervescent self and everything. But Ed was in a wheelchair, and they had a nurse with him. He couldn't speak. He was paralyzed. He could just make noises. And it was very sad to see this guy who was so hale and hearty, come to that end. So Lorraine and I, we went out to lunch, and I just, talked to her again for a while. And it was only about probably less than a month after that interview that Ed passed away from, his stroke or whatever. Then, of course, Lorraine has passed away, I guess, maybe 2 years ago now or more. So they're very nice people. Their style of procedures when they're investigating and their paranormal beliefs were not 100% in sync with mine, but it didn't matter. They were very open and willing to share and just very generous people.
I think that's a key point in this whole grand scheme of things with the paranormal. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of the paranormal is based off of the Catholic Christian religion, but so many different people have different ways of beliefs and ways of doing things. I think that's what's wonderful about the paranormal. Not everybody's an expert. Well, nobody's an expert because nobody really knows.
Right.
So, everybody that gets together and shares ideas, the more we learn about this stuff from so many different aspects.
Yeah, I agree. And in the years that I've been doing this, I have worked with, I don't know how many, I'll call them ghost hunting teams or paranormal teams, all across America, but internationally too. And so I've come to meet a lot of different people in the field, gotten a lot of different information from them, a lot of ideas that we've shared. And you're right. I don't feel that I'm an expert. I feel that I'm a student. I'm still learning every day and learning from other people and from my own experiences, So I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't have probably any of the answers. I might have some guesses, but I'm not sure I have any of the answers,
So you've done a lot of work with shapeshifters, and that's our topic tonight. And I don't know if I'm not the smartest person in the world, obviously, but I never imagined shapeshifters as anything other than the Native American witches. But there's so much more to these things.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a shapeshifter, and how did you get interested in these things?
Yeah, so I'll tell you how the interest happened. I do a lot of public speaking, primarily about ghosts, because I have 5 books about ghosts in addition to my shapeshifter book. So that's kind of where I started. So a lot of times when I'm doing these events where I'm giving some kind of a public talk at a library or university or podcast or something like that, people will always want to share their experiences, their ghostly experiences, which is great. But so often when people would talk to me about what they saw or experienced, I would say, well, that doesn't really sound like a ghost. It sounded more like what I kind of thought a shapeshifter was like. So because I was hearing this so much, I thought that's interesting. I knew kind of what a shapeshifter was, but after hearing so many people mentioning things, I thought, well, I'm going to check into this a little bit. So I started doing some research. And what I found out was that the shapeshifter character, and I'll explain what I think a shapeshifter is in a minute, is ubiquitous in cultures all around the world. For this book, I was in 8 different countries in Europe, 3 or 4 in Asia, doing research on this stuff. And I found that almost every culture, like I said, has some kind of a shapeshifter character. And this goes way back. It goes back to prehistoric times up to today. So when I talk about a shapeshifter, the sort of standard definition is a person who has the ability to change themselves, to transform themselves into something else. It's usually an animal, but it doesn't have to be an animal. It could be another person, it could be any kind of animal. Sometimes it could be even an inanimate object. Like in Japanese culture and Japanese folklore, there are dozens and dozens of shapeshifters that are people that change to things like a broom. I don't know why they would do that. It would seem like if you have the ability to shift into something, it's not going to be a broom, but they do. So that's kind of the basic definition. But in my book, I really expand that definition because I sort of started using what I call external shapeshifters and internal shapeshifters. These are just terms that I made up. I mean, they're not technical terms at all. But what I meant by that was an external shapeshifter was the kind of shapeshifter like you're talking about in Native American culture, like a skinwalker, for instance, a shaman or conjurer or something that transforms into, especially like out in the Southwest where you are, like a coyote or a wolf or something like that, and then back. The quintessential one is a werewolf. When you say werewolf, oh, now I know what you mean. You say shapeshifter because everybody knows from movies and everything else what a werewolf is, a person that changes into a wolf and back again. So those are external in that there's actually an external change, right? Where you grow fur, you grow claws, you get fangs. But I talked also about something called an internal shapeshifter, which is a psychological change, a mental psychological change, where for all practical purposes, nothing happens on the outside. You look as you always did, but there's a shift inside you where you become something else. And, there's a lot of sort of, I'm not a psychologist. I really wish I had studied psychology more as I'm thinking about it now in later life. But psychologists who talk about split personalities and that kind of thing. There's a famous Billy Milligan. I don't know if you know the book, The Minds of Billy Milligan. This was a guy who had something like 8 or 9 personalities within him. And at different times, different personalities would come out. But you looked at him and he was still Billy Milligan. There was no change. So I'm talking about that because that's also shape-shifting. It's just a different kind.
But that's not what somebody can do at will, though, correct?
I was just going to say that. Wow, you're a mind reader. I was just going to say, I was just going to say the idea of volition comes in here because, like with skinwalkers, for instance, they traditionally can willfully change themselves when they want to, for whatever reason they want to. Werewolves have long been considered cursed, that there's something that they're cursed. Somehow they're cursed, and so the change, they can't control the change. Although that's changing now too in some contemporary folklore and novels and literature where the werewolves have that volition as well. Like, I'm going to change now, and I will. But the internal shapeshifters, that can go either way too. It could be something where somebody has the willpower to do that, or it could be something where they can't control it, that it's out of their control. I'm not saying a curse, but it's just out of their control. There's some other, I don't want to say entity, but maybe that's the word to use, some other energy, some other force behind that change. So that's kind of, so I guess what I'm saying is this book really expands the idea of what it means to be a shapeshifter. We're not just talking about something very simple like a skinwalker or a werewolf. I go into a whole range of different kinds of shapeshifters, I guess.
Is there so essentially not all shapeshifters are evil?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of another misconception, is that skinwalkers. My definition that I've heard from Native people like Dene people or the Utes, is that skinwalkers are evil. That usually it's a sorcerer or a conjurer or a shaman who has evil intention, and he can manifest that intention by changing into something, like a wolf or coyote or something. But you're right. No, not all shapeshifters are evil at all. There's a whole body of shapeshifting. If you look at folklore from Europe and some other areas, there's a lot of different, there's shapeshifting fairies. There's shapeshifters that are mischievous, like to pull pranks on people, but they're not really evil. And then there's a blend. There's a shapeshifter in Japan called a kappa, Kappa. And this thing is weird. When you look at Japanese folklore, it's like a frog. Looks like a frog. But he has a depression, a shallow depression on the top of his head, and there's water in that depression. And he carries the water around with him all the time. I don't know why. But they live in creeks and streams and things like this. Now, they'll do favors for people. Like for fishermen, they'll help get some fish and leave them for fishermen and stuff. But they'll also eat children,
Nice.
So I mean, you catch them on a bad day and you're in trouble. You catch them on a good day, you're okay. You get fish. So.
Well, you caught me at the with Fae shapeshifters. Can you talk a little bit about that? And the reason I ask is because, like I was telling you before the show, there is a new theory going around that I've heard recently about shapeshifters that are actually elementals out here in the mining towns and stuff. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this?
Well, not in your area like you're talking about now. And I'm not sure that I've heard the connection to elementals, although I could understand where that could be true. What can you back up a little bit more what you've heard on that? Or
yeah, so there's a couple of investigations that I've done out here where we've come into direct contact with some entities that are not human. based. They're not human at all. They're elementals. We have shadows that are like 2 foot tall. Some of them are 3 foot tall, and they seem to come out like at dusk. And so the theory I've heard from local Native Americans is that the Native Americans called these spirits up to protect their land against the people who were trying to take it from them. So that's the theory, and they're still around these ghost towns and other parts of the Southwest.
Okay. Well, and I think elementals generally, I mean, I think I'm not an expert on elementals, but I think almost universally, aren't they sort of associated with being like guardians of the environment or the land or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
But I don't know about them as being shapeshifters. I mean, I suppose they could be. I'd be interested to know if there's any stories where, like you say, you see these shadows. Do they ever change into anything? Do they ever shift?
Okay, so I've never experienced anything like that, but I know people say that they will shift into coyotes, which is what we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that's a favorite animal for skinwalkers.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I don't know. Are they all connected?
Well, I'm wondering. It's an interesting connection there. And the fact that the coyote is, it's an animal that's been in that area for, who knows, millennia or whatever, right? I mean, it's a natural part of that landscape. And certainly
way out on a limb here. I could be, way out on a limb.
No, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because you think of native tales with coyote as trickster, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the quintessential trickster among so many indigenous nations. So it's interesting. I'm going to start looking into this. I wish I could tell you more. I don't know. I've never really heard, them being elementals being referred to as shapeshifters, but it could be. When I look at it's interesting as you're saying that, though, because I'm thinking of some of the other countries that I did research in, like especially in Eastern Europe. I was in Belarus. I was in Romania, Ukraine. And there's a lot of folk figures there that are sort of protectors, again, like you're talking about, of the land. And several of them are shapeshifters. I don't know if you would consider their basic nature as elementals or not, but maybe because they have this history of being, ancient, mm-hmm. and in the same location. And always doing things like looking out for the land, the resources.
Yeah, they're always connected to the land. They're not human.
Right. And like I said, these I know in Eastern Europe, I know some of these are also referred to as shapeshifters, and they do, in the folklore and everything, there is shapeshifting. So, it would make sense that could be happening among native peoples here in North America. I mean,
how would it? Yeah, exactly. Because it seems like all across the world, all of the stories, all religion, all spiritual matters, all seem to follow the same pattern, but just called different names. They all have the same stories, just about. Like there's always a creation story. There's always some underground entities that come forth. There's always something, some bigger God figure, or what I mean, that connects everybody. Every religion has something like this, or every culture has this sort of same ideals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's true. I think when you look at all religions, you dig deep enough, study hard enough. I don't want to go out to a limb and say they're all the same, but in a way they are. They all seem to have the same message and the same grounding, stories that they build on.
So tell me about the Fae in Shapeshifters that you were going to mention. Before I dived off into the Native American.
What was I going to say? Oh, well, yeah. So there are fairies and fae people in a lot of European folklore that are shapeshifters. In Italy, there's the I think trying to remember. I think called Donna Fieri, which almost sounds like fiery woman. And there are shapeshifters they're nice. They're fairies, and they will take you on a trip to a city in Italy that doesn't exist. And I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. I have to go look at my own book to find out what it is. But it's a city that is it's a fae city, and they will shift as to humans and invite you there and take you there, and they're fairies, and you have a great time, and then they leave you alone and they take you back home. So I mean,
why did you sign up for that trip?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that's about. I don't know why they do that, but they do. And there's other ones like that, that rural sort of fae shapeshifters that leave presents of like food and stuff for people, especially like in a lot of the Celtic areas. That's pretty typical, the typical Celtic tradition. So yeah, again, this is what's been new to me, because I think growing up, a fairy was a little tiny female with wings that flew around. It was nice and had a wand.
Might give you a quarter or something if you lost the tooth.
Yeah, that was a fairy, right? And I never even thought of like the fae, what it was always a fairy. But like I said, as I've started to do all this research, I find out, oh my gosh, that in some traditions, they're also shapeshifters. They take on the form of humans and everything else. Actually, if you think of, get into literature a little bit, if you think of Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, if you look at the fairy folk that are in there, the elfin folks, I mean, these are not like little tiny people. These are big, strong people,
That's interesting. The fae, that's another one. They exist in every culture as well.
Yeah.
All over the place. They're in China as the yin, I think it is, or the din, right?
The jinn?
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Well, jinn is more Middle East and India and stuff. That's what we call, we say genie.
Yeah.
The jinn is that's what it is.
And then you got gnomes, you have fairies, Christmas elves.
Elf on the shelf.
Elf on the shelf.
Right. He changes. You put him on the shelf, next thing you know, he's somewhere else. So,
And that there's a Snoop on a stoop now.
Oh, no.
Like Snoop Dogg. I don't know if he shapeshifts, though.
I don't know. I'll forget one from my dog. Snoop on this. Yeah, okay.
So can you talk a little bit about the mythology and religions and shapeshifters?
Yeah. So
I know we touched a little bit about it, but
right. So I mean, you start talking about religions and the basis, and how a lot of them have similarities. Well, this is kind of what I found too, is that the shapeshifter character appears in mythology and sort of more traditional modern religion. And I make the distinction because mythology is, we think of mythology as myth. We think of it as stories, but for the people of the times, the ancient Egyptians, Romans, Greeks, whatever, these weren't stories. I mean, they were stories, but they were stories about their gods. This was their religion. It wasn't myth in terms of the way we think of myth. So I found that the earliest representation of a shapeshifter appears in a cave painting in France, and it dates back to the Neolithic period. So we're talking way back. We're talking prehistory, right? And the drawing, I have it in my book too, it shows what looks like sort of a deer standing on its hind legs with its arms kind of up. But if you look at that deer really closely, you notice a couple of unusual things about it. So instead of having hooves on its feet, has toes. You can see lines that actually has toes. Well, deer don't have toes, right? You look at the eyes on this thing, the head is turned towards you, straight on. And the eyes are like ours. They're bicameral. They're right there. They're not on the sides like a horse or a deer would be. So, and it's got antlers. So people are saying, well, what is this thing? I mean, it looks like a deer, but it looks like a person. So anthropologists believe that what this was a representation of a shaman transforming from a man into a deer It could be an elk. We don't know exactly what it is, a deer, elk, something like that. So you say, well, why would that be on the wall and what's that about? And what they believe was that this goes back to ancient hunter magic, as they call it, which was that the shaman would be getting the hunters together to go out to hunt for the tribe for food. And so he'd be getting sort of prepped for this. And what he would do is, he'd paint this drawing of people transforming into animals. You say, well, why would you do that? Well, if you're a prehistoric person on foot with, a rock in your hand, and that's about all you have to go hunting, the closer you can get to that animal that you're hunting, the better your chances are going to be of bringing it down, right? You don't have a long-range rifle that you can shoot. You don't have a four-wheel that you can chase them around the prairie or anything. You've got to get close to them. So how do you get close to them? You get close to them if the animal thinks that you're one of them. Well, how do you become one of them? Well, you transform, right? You shapeshift. So what they believe was going on here was the shaman would, have the hunters with him, and they get worked up in a frenzy, chanting or whatever, but also, this is the key thing, ingesting natural hallucinogenics from the environment, mushrooms or something else like that would cause hallucinations and cause the hunters to actually believe that they've transformed into that animal. And so now they're prepared to go out and hunt because they can get close to them. So this goes way, way back. And that's kind of religion in a way, this hunter magic thing.
You see that in a lot of tribes and things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot of indigenous people around the world have that kind of, thing too, especially if there's still a hunter culture or something where they have to go out, and depend on their wits and strength for survival. But then when things get a little bit more civilized in terms of Europe, especially, and you get Greeks and Romans and their whole pantheons of gods and goddesses, you find that there's a lot of shapeshifting going on among the gods. In the Greek pantheon, for instance, Zeus, who was the god of gods, the father of the gods, transforms probably, the myths have probably 20 different transformations that he makes into all different kinds of things, all kinds of animals, bulls, eagles, an ant. He transforms at one point into a shower of gold. He transforms into another woman's husband so that he can be with that woman, and she's thinking she's with her husband and she's with Zeus. So there's all these transformations he makes. And you see the same thing in the Roman culture too. It's gods and goddesses. And the Egyptians, it's all the gods that are doing shapeshifting. But the average person, no. There are no, what would I say? There's no like wizards or sorcerers or witches or whatever with that power in these old mythologies. It comes from the gods. And so the gods can do what they want with it. And a lot of times they punish mortals by changing them into something. Forgot who the woman was, but she was being pursued by another guy for bad reasons. And her protector was a goddess, maybe Athena. And so she transformed the woman who was running away into a tree. So that was it. That stopped the pursuit, and she became a tree. I'm not sure for life. So I'm not sure that worked out to the best of her advantage, but there was that kind of thing going on. It's not until we get into, up until almost the medieval era, and a little bit past that, where the reverence and absolute belief that we had in all these gods and goddesses start to fade off. These old gods die out, right? So they're replaced by more traditional religion. But even then, while that's going on, there's this vacuum. And so what happens is that vacuum is filled by the people like the witches and the sorcerers and the conjurers and whatever, people that have power, that have somehow gotten this power for transformation. So now it's evolved from the gods down to mortals. although he's immortals with special abilities. So that's where we get, so much of the stuff that you see like in Wicca and so many other places. Yeah. Ideas of shape-shifting and all, it comes from that. So, but even in the established religions, like in Christianity, for instance, if you read the Bible, there are passages in the Bible that seem to talk about shape-shifting. There's a passage in Daniel, and I don't have it memorized, but basically the passage goes something like, this person, it was Nebuchadnezzar, who was like, I guess a Persian ruler or something in those days, Babylonian, Persian, I don't know. But he basically defied God. And so for that, was turned into an animal. This is in Daniel. And it says something like, he grew hair, his claws were covered with dew, he was out eating grass. Okay. This is a king that is now shapeshifted into an animal. And even to get into the New Testament, there are stories about Jesus that some theologians, particularly a guy in the Netherlands at the University of Utrecht, believe indicate that he may have been a shapeshifter as well. There's at least 3 or 4 passages that I have in the book that, he points out that he thinks Jesus was a shapeshifter because of that. And my book was reviewed by the Catholic Herald, of all places. And they liked the book, which I found amazing.
Did they like that passage?
Well, they didn't like that passage. They liked the book, but when they said they got that, they said, no, totally, it's impossible and stuff. But then I started thinking, wait a minute. I had no recourse. They wrote the review. It was good up to that point. But I thought to myself, okay, so if you are a Christian and you believe that Jesus is God, if you believe that he walked on water, cured the sick, made blind people see, raised the dead, raised himself from the dead, how hard would it be to shift? I mean, he should be able to do that, right? If he's God,
technically.
What's that?
I said technically, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, anyway, that's a little screwy on the religion. I don't, I sort of opened the book with the religion because I think it's interesting to see sort of that aspect of the shapeshifter. But certainly they appear in folklore all around the country, all around the world. That doesn't really have anything to do necessarily with religious beliefs as much as just, folkloric beliefs and traditions, especially like with vampires.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the vampire thing. Before we get into that, though, I just have a quick question with the idea of dressing up, these shamans dressing up into these animals, become the animal to capture them. Is this in a sense, like you look at the bear, speaking of Romania, that bear ritual that they have every Christmas to where they're dressing up as the bears. And I forget what it symbolizes, but they parade down the street to bring back the sun, and it's a full agent ritual. But that's in essence what they're doing. They're dressing themselves up to shapeshift into a bear that represents, maybe.
So, good.
But you see that so often, particularly around when things like winter solstice and all of these different major holidays, I guess. Like you see it with Carnival even.
Oh, yeah. Well, the whole idea of dressing up. Every Halloween, thousands of us dress up, right? In addition to that, there's cosplayers that, are characters all 365 days of the year for some of them. They dress like their character, they talk like their character. And the question is, why? Why do you, if you're going to dress up for Halloween, how do you decide on what costume you're going to wear? What moves you to either put on a Superman suit or a Krusty the Clown suit? What's it going to be, right? It tells you something about yourself, doesn't it? And it tells you, I think, in a way, sort of what you would like to be. And that's the whole part of kind of the psychology of the shapeshifter, I think, is that it offers us sort of a vicarious way to act out. Not necessarily even in the best way, but to act out in a safe way. Human beings we know we have an animal nature. We know we have sort of a good side, bad side, if you want to call it that, dark side, whatever. Most of us, thank God, can keep it under control, but, some of us can't. If you look at Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Jekyll is this well-respected physician, saving lives, very religious, very devout, wonderful guy, nice guy. And yet, there is something inside him that says, what would it be like if I could throw off everything that holds me, that constrains me, the law, my religion, my sense of morality? What if I could throw all that off and just go run wild in the woods at night, howling at the moon or something, right? So he develops a potion to allow himself to do that. And he becomes Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, who is this horrible, reprehensible person that ends up murdering somebody. And Jekyll finds out that he can't control it anymore, and he ends up killing himself. So there's a shapeshifter. And that story is a really great story if anybody's interested in shapeshifting, because it really kind of talks about that psychology. And I think that's a big reason why the character is so popular still, because it gives us a chance to identify with somebody that's running around in the woods. Maybe you'd like to run around in the woods, but we don't. So you can do it by reading a novel, watching a movie about werewolves, dressing up on Halloween and pretending you're a werewolf or whatever.
I think it's culturally, it's so romanticized now to just the idea of becoming something else that's immortal, or the vampire in Rice's series. How great would it be to live multiple lives like that throughout the centuries and acquire the wealth and everything that was done with the characters in that book?
Right. And then what was you look at Twilight and that series, and all these vampires are glamorous and rich, and, culturally fluent, and they're just wonderful people, and they're vampires, But
so yeah. You've been to Romania. I got to hear about the Romania stories that you've been there.
Well, what I did for Romania primarily was obviously the vampire story, because of Dracula, right? And Dracula, I think probably most of your audience knows this, I would imagine, is based somewhat on an actual medieval prince, Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, that's his real name, but they called him Vlad the Impaler because he liked to impale all his enemies on 12-foot poles, which was pretty disgusting. Pretty disgusting way to go. But so I was trying to follow that. So I followed all the sites. I went to all the sites that were affiliated with Vlad himself. So like in one town, I went to the house where he was supposedly born.
Yeah. Singer Sora.
Yeah. Have you been there? Have you been there, Minnie? Oh, yeah. Okay. So you know all these places. Yeah. And I went to the burial site, in Snagov on the lake.
There's several burial sites there that all claim.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about Snagov is there's this, did you go to Snagov at all? I mean, it's this little, beautiful little tiny chapel on an island. Mm-hmm. It's great. But then, you notice that, okay, there's this slab there and it's supposed to be his grave. And then you realize that in the 1930s, some anthropologists opened the grave for whatever reason. There wasn't anything in there. So
you might have shapeshift out of there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the question. If he really was there and he's not there now, where is he? So, but it was interesting. Yes, I went to all those locations and I got a chance to talk to a lot of the people. I had some Romanian friends and got to stay in some communities and everything outside of not being in hotels, And what I found that there's the Romanian people have different viewpoints on vampires, and especially on Dracula, or even on Vlad, who was, like I say, a real historical character. Because some of them, if they are of Hungarian descent, which is pretty typical up in Transylvania, especially in that area, Vlad was not very nice to people of Hungarian descent. He was sort of a different strain and killed a lot of them. So when those people today who are still speaking Hungarian and are still actually being discriminated against by the Romanian government in a lot of ways, when they hear tales about, Vlad, the hero, and all this kind of stuff, they don't have anything to do with it. But then other Romanians go, yeah, he was a national hero. He defended us against the Turks, against, the Mongols, against a bunch of people. Okay, so he killed a lot of people, but, I'm not sure how the story connects, though. I'm not sure how Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula, how he actually was able to connect Vlad with Dracula, because I don't know stories.
That's like a whole literature conversation.
I know. We
That
don't have to have it. We don't have to have it. I'm a writer. It's interesting to me.
I mean, Bram never even steps foot in Romania, and he ends up
That's right.
creating this dynamic and putting Romania on the map, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Nobody. I mean, I don't think any Americans would go to Romania right now if it wasn't for Dracula.
Yeah, agreed.
It's a beautiful country. I mean, you've been there. It's a beautiful country. And
It is.
It's
gorgeous. And the thing about Romania is that the people there they're so nice, but they're very superstitious.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of them, they will not go outside at nighttime. They're very fearful of land spirits, and I forget the name of the witches that they believe that roam the woods around there. There's a name for them, and I forget.
Yeah.
But they're very superstitious. You can see it's intertwined in all the houses, especially when you go out into the villages.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see like the intricate work on the houses. That's all hand carved even by the house person, because they want to protect the house from evil spirits. Yep,
absolutely. There's actually, this is interesting that we're talking about this now, because, Christmas is coming up, and there's an old belief in Romania and in some other Eastern European countries that if you are born on Christmas Day, you have an excellent chance of becoming a werewolf. And you say, well, why? Well, because Christmas Day is when Jesus was born, right? So if you're, horning in on his birthday, he's not going to like that. So if anybody born on Christmas Day, they still think, well, there's a chance that this person may end up becoming a werewolf. And there was even a Swedish pastor in the 16th century that wrote this whole kind of story about what happens at Christmas in Romania and other sort of Eastern European countries around there, which is that he says werewolves get together. You're talking about like a witch's coven. This would be like a werewolf coven, that they get together at Christmas, and they go to isolated, like rural villages. They go to isolated farmhouses and all, and they attack them, and they kill people and eat them. So Merry Christmas.
A lot of Christmas though has that. I'm putting out a magazine either tonight or tomorrow morning, and it's about pagan Christmas. And you don't realize how un-Christian Christmas really is.
Well,
elves from Saint Nicholas himself. There's Krampus. There's an actual witch. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on with Christmas that has nothing to do with the niceties that we'd like to do.
When you go to Italy around Christmas time, in the Christmas markets in all the squares, they have, I cannot remember, La Bufina. It's a witch. Mm-hmm. It's a little, you buy a little witch on a broom, and she's the Christmas witch. And she comes around at Christmas,
She even has a familiar and evil cat that, I forget what the cat does, but there's a cat involved in this too.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Well, and of course, Christmas, like you talked about, Christianity. I mean, as we know, Christianity adopted all these pagan dates and put their own thing on it. Easter becomes something, Christmas becomes something. But, was Jesus really born on December 25th? Probably not. But that's time of the solstice and all, that kind of stuff. So Christianity was smart in that they just put their trappings on the already established pagan religions, feasts or festivals, whatever you want to call it.
What a great way to, if you want to change a culture completely, just take over their major holidays.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Shapeshifters sightings and experiences. I know we're running out of time here, but I wanted to get into at least one or two sightings and experiences.
Yeah. So I, doing some research, I was amazed to actually find like newspaper accounts and everything of shape-shifting experiences. One took place in India in the province of Uttar Pradesh, and I think it dates from around maybe 1997, 98, something like that. So it's recent, right? This isn't centuries old. And it was actually in the New York Times that this article appeared. And over a period of something like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, something like 40 children in that province, or the province, went missing. Right? And some were found later, the bodies were found later, and looked like they were savaged by an animal or something. So people were getting concerned. I mean, 40, it's not unusual for maybe a child to disappear in the jungle or something, and, bad things can happen. But 40 in this short period of time sort of became sort of mass hysteria. And people started accusing other people of being sorcerers and killing these kids and all that kind of stuff. And they actually killed a couple of people who they accused. What they thought was happening was they were talking about being attacked by an animal. And so the New York Times account the reporter interviewed some people there. And they interviewed like a 12-year-old girl. And she said that she saw her brother, like a 4-year-old brother, carried off by, she called it a man wolf, not a wolf man. She called it a man wolf. The reporter asked her what it looked like. And she said, well, it was tall and hairy and furry. It ran on 2 legs like a man. And it grabbed my little brother and it just ran off with him. We haven't seen him again since. And there was a truck driver interviewed. He said that he saw something like that run across the road. Anyway, this happened. This was going on for about 6 months, and it just stopped after a while. Nobody saw whatever the thing was, either disappeared, died, was gone. I don't know, left, who knows. But the interesting thing was nobody actually saw a transformation, but they clearly described what sounds like what we would say like a werewolf or something. They described it as, man-sized, running on 2 legs. And that's an account in the New York Times. I had one from South Africa too, which was pretty interesting. And it was about, it's bizarre. It was about a guy who was in a little village, and he was in his hut, and he heard this like knocking outside on the wall, and he opened his door, and he described it as just like a giant bat. There are giant bats in some places in the world, but this was there in his door, and he grabbed some kind of a stick or something. He was whacking the thing, and it kind of flew off, and he went after it, and he chased it. And he's yelling to the villagers, hey, come on, there's something out here. So they chase this thing, and they get it up against the wall or something, and it's clearly kind of like dying. But they said that as it was dying, that before their very eyes, it transformed from a bat into a pig, and then into a man. Now, this is an account from a newspaper in South Africa, and these villagers said they saw this. And the man they identified, he was an elderly man who they thought was kind of I guess we'll call it a shaman, for lack of a better word. So you've got witnesses to this thing, and it just sounds, I mean, I hate to say it, but it just sounds so incredible that, like, really, but there it is. I mean, so there's stories like that. There's a story out of London. Again, I think of the movie Werewolf in London, because there was sightings of what they called an old striker. And it was like this big wolf kind of thing that several people saw in London. And again, running sometimes on 2 legs, and like clearing fences that were like 8 feet tall or something, just like, hopping right over. So anyway, those are some.
Wow.
Yeah. There's more in the book, but
So where can people buy your book?
Well, hopefully it's in some of the bookstores, but it came out in 2019, so it's been out a while. But it's certainly on Amazon. It's on any online vendor, Barnes and Noble, any of those people online. And it might be in your local bookstore too. If not, you can ask for it. They can get it through there too. All my books are pretty much available that way.
And what other books do you have? I know you said you've written several on the paranormal.
Yeah. So, I mean, the best thing is my website is johnkachuba.com. Pretty easy. If you go to that, all my books are listed. But I have 2 books about ghosts in Ohio called Ghost Hunting Ohio on the Road Again, Ghost Hunters, which was the book I told you about celebrities, Shapeshifters, a paranormal novel based on a real location in Connecticut, the one I spoke to you about earlier called Dark Entry. And that's what the novel is also called, Dark Entry. And I have a paranormal novel for middle grade kids, which is the first time I've written for that audience, based on a location here in Ohio. It's called the Loveland Castle. And it's a castle that was built by one man over 50 years. And it's beautiful. It's a 1/4 scale size castle. It's incredible. And it's haunted. So I have a story there too. And I also have other ones that have nothing to do with the paranormal. But, those are.
What's your story on the castle?
So the castle it's very cool. It's built right on the Little Miami River, and this guy Harry Andrews, back in probably maybe 1930s or so, bought the property, and he was an engineer, and he had this whole love affair with the medieval era, and he started hauling rocks up out of the Little Miami River and started building a Norman style castle, and over 50 years he built this beautiful, beautiful castle, which he actually lived in while he was building it. And today it's open to the public. It's furnished inside. It's got garden terraces and built on the hillside and the river. But even as Harry was building this thing, for the 50 years that he was there, he said, I always knew there was something special about this land. Talking about elementals again, maybe we are. He said, I know that even as I was building this, I would see figures in the hillside and in the woods around the place. And I always thought of them as kind of, benign, sort of comforting spirits in a way. And he talked about seeing a woman rise up out of the Little Miami River one day, just slowly lift out of the river and kind of drift across the water. So he said they were there and that they were in the castle, and Harry passed away around, 1989, 1990, something like that. And some people say that he's still in the castle that he loved and lived in. So I created a story and set these 2 12-year-old boys in it, and it's at the castle, based in the castle. And some schools have used it here as a 4th grade reader and stuff. So it's been a lot of fun.
Really cool. Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to come on tonight.
Thank you, CL. It's been a pleasure. So,
I'll have you come back to discuss your other work.
Anytime.
And there you have it. That's John, and our show was on Shapeshifters. You've been listening to The Gateway, your portal to the unexplained, the mythical, and otherworldly, broadcast live from United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans. I'll be back next week. See you soon.